All right, the cameras and stuff are live.
We're
How's
doing it
everyone
live.
doing? Yeah, we're doing it live.
Can't complain.
Can't
Yeah,
complain myself.
I'm doing well.
Well, so we're excited to say that we're joined by our friend Vince, better known on like the Instagram and internet circles and stuff as Dark Tech. We're happy to have you here today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, no, always good to touch base with other fellow hobbyists because everybody kind of has their own interesting perspective on the hobby and the like. So it's good to hear different thoughts and opinions about stuff.
All right, question that isn't part of the podcast yet, but Dark Tech, is that something to do with Adeptus Mechanicus and Chaos Adeptus Mechanicus? And other question, the little underscores, I like them. Particularly how you have one after Dark and one after Tech. That's kind of interesting that you have the one after Tech. Was that just to be consistent, or?
Yeah, it was just a consistent thing. And the Dark Tech, it was so back when I first got back into Warhammer, I was like, oh, I want to do a Dark Mechanicus because the Scutari actually were like the first thing that kind of hooked me back in. And so just kind of wrote it out then ever since.
Yeah, all right.
That makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's a good name, good
Thanks.
logo, all that stuff. I feel it makes for fairly iconic and very recognizable. And I feel you also have a very recognizable style and kind of painting scheme. So it all works together and I think complements one another pretty well. And I guess we'll probably talk a little bit about that on the podcast, kind of trying to get a sense of, how you go about creating things and whatnot. But
it's also an easier name to spell out and remember, and easier Instagram handle to type than like fucking Between the Bolter and Me.
Jesus Christ, yeah. We did not.
Yeah, who did that?
Yeah,
it was not good. It's also something that we probably couldn't really copyright, or if we did, it might be questionable because
Well, I mean, the whole thing was just supposed to be stupid, so
it was. So I mean,
well, that, and even like GW could get pissed because we used Bolter, and the prog metal band Between the Buried and Me could get pissed because we have the same abbreviation, BT BAM.
Yeah, it's
like,
true.
It's guaranteed there are some people that are going to look up stuff about their favorite prog metal band Between the Buried and Me, like, oh, I want to read about Parallax 2 and their crazy prog rock epics, and it's like, what the fuck is this Between the Bolter and Me? Guaranteed it happens.
That, or it's really smart and you guys are going to target their whole
so actually
hop on.
Yeah, so there's probably a certain demographic that will be like, whoa, look at these cool sci-fi models that fit right in line with the weird shit that BT Bam is singing about.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Well, I guess actually, so a bunch of people are in the chat here. We can say hello. Nice to see you, Vox, Dave, Dave, Ward, Sylvania, Meandering Shade, Eli seems you're here too. Captain Tim. Yeah, so lots of people here. So that's exciting.
Hi, everyone.
If Vox asks how long till they get mad and have YouTube delete our channel, I don't know. I like to think BT Bam as a band. They're probably good dudes.
Well, I would think it's more GW. Maybe they would get mad.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel they're not as, I don't know.
Is Bolter copyrighted? Is Bolter copyrighted? It's probably too generic. Like, because bolt gun or bolt pistol, like the name of the little mnemonic, like, gun thing that they used to kill cattle with, that was like used to dazzling effect in the film No Country for Old Men. I mean, that's called a captive bolt pistol. So like, that's a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we could argue that our blog that focuses on or has Space Marines with bolt guns. Like, that's not what the bolter is. It's not that. That's ridiculous.
It's the captive bolt pistol for killing cattle.
Eli says if anyone is going to get mad and make you delete things, it's dragged into sunlight.
Oh boy. Yeah. Also, Dragged into Sunlight is a UK like doom metal / black metal band that they're cool. They just got fucked over by their record label, Prosthetic Records, which they had signed on to a 4-album deal. And when they gave the record label their 4th album, like a year or so ago, the record label said that they needed to make it longer, and they didn't want to do that. And then the record label stopped talking to them. And I guess just recently, the record label put out that record unbeknownst to them.
Oh my god.
But
Wow,
whatever. We'll stop talking about Dragged into Sunlight.
Yeah.
But Vince, you're here. We have more interesting stuff to talk about.
Yeah. So I guess we can, at least initially, before we get really into the podcast, we can do some of our regular stuff at the beginning, or like sort of hobby hoedown bullshit. So I guess I can talk a little bit about what I'm working on. I actually have a picture of the model up right now. So I started working on more of like a conversion of an Eldar pirate, based, at least loosely based around the new Bone Reaper models. It's not super evident right now because you can only see part of the legs, but he has like the Bone Reaper legs, and part of his mask is from the Bone Reapers. I was gonna use some of the body of the Bone Reaper model, but turns out they really don't have bodies. They're just shoulder pads and they're like hips, so there's nothing there to work with. So I couldn't do that.
It is really cool looking. I didn't realize that jaw was from the Bone Reapers.
Yeah, so that's from one of their death masks or whatever.
Whomever sculpted it wrote some stuff about it. Maybe it was on Instagram saying that, I guess he did some stuff with dentistry or something. Yeah. And so we got to use some of his knowledge about that for sculpting them nice looking teeth.
Nice.
Yeah, I feel it's like perhaps the coolest part of the new Bone Reaper range, that those grins. So I feel that in itself, I think people maybe will start to realize that they could be used for things like this, for making cooler masks for assassins and things of that nature. You don't have to use the rest of the Bone Reaper models because
it's gonna be hard.
Are sort of derpy.
Yeah.
In kind of a Masters of the Universe sort of way, which is sort of nostalgic and fun in its own right, but
maybe I feel not with
what we want.
Over the past few years, GW has been moving further and further away from the heroic proportions, except for the feet. The feet are still as big as ever, but a lot of the other stuff they're changing. With a lot of these Bone Reaper models, they really dialed it back to heroic, super distorted, small abdomens and bodies and stuff, big World of Warcraft He-Man shoulders and stuff, and I don't like it.
I mean, in their defense, since they're just constructs made of bone, they can be whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
But that's maybe not what I would have wanted if I could be whatever I wanted to be.
Thanks for the follow, Mango Smasher 94. Glad to have you here.
Yeah.
That's Haunter.
Yeah, we don't often see that because no one follows us. Not yet.
Well,
in time.
So, Vince, are you doing anything cool now?
Adepticon's coming up.
Yeah, so I've got a huge vertical plate, vertical tower type board I'm working on. Partially because I have very little space left in my apartment for any sort of big terrain piece. But I'm kind of going vertical with this one, and then I've got a at least one warband I got to try to scrap together
Mm-hmm.
by March.
Yeah, Adepticon's in March
It's almost
sometime.
here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well,
It's
so
a
I guess
lot of
maybe
work.
some of that with more detailed discussion that can maybe be saved for the actual podcast part. But yeah, so you have a bunch of work ahead of you and
Mhm.
not that much time to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get
But I
that.
work fast, so I should be okay.
I don't.
Yeah.
No.
No, I feel like this Eldar, the Eldar pirate, the little pistol. I feel I probably spent over 4 hours working on the stupid little pistol, and it's not fucking done.
But it looks awesome.
It's gonna
so
be
at least
it's gonna be
paying off.
cool in the end.
And I like those. Are you going to keep the arm length? I'm looking at this
Oh
now.
yeah, it's gonna
They're
be
like these
long,
long,
creepy.
spindly.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's gonna
like
be
that a lot.
different. They're gonna look different than the kind of squat, supremely broad-shouldered Eldar that GW currently has.
Have you thought paint scheme?
Not a whole lot yet.
What do you think, Vince?
So I don't know. If you go like if you go the the Bilton, the white green, it will definitely it will remind people that it's Eldar.
This is an Eldar. That's true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think with a white green, you could still probably make it look sinister, because I know that's obviously what you're going for here.
Yeah,
I think it could be
an
cool.
Interesting idea. Yeah, I'll have to think more on it. And I feel once the model's actually done, I'll feel maybe it'll speak more to me, like what it should be.
See, I mean, I don't even know what most of the Eldar, the different craft world Eldar, like, are like, because no one cares about Eldar.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not quite true.
No one in the Ink 28 community does.
Yeah. I
Well, I
played
guess-
Eldar way back in the day. But
Sam Hahn, I don't remember what they look like. I remember
They're the red
that name.
one. Or they have some red. And they have all their
And
jet
a
bikes.
white head.
I don't know. Does anyone here in chat? Are they keeping up with the current 40k lore? Because I sort of remember after the fall, where after Cadia and shit was destroyed, the book after that focused on the Eldar and stuff.
Wild Pan got fractured or some
I
sort.
think that happened, but I also think so. Morgan Raw, he had his like craft world was all like thought to be destroyed or sucked into the warp and stuff. I forget what they were called, the bone ones. I'm pretty sure in that book they come back.
I don't know.
They come back out of the warp or some bullshit. So I mean, could make an argument that this friend here is from that or
Wait
something.
a minute, guys. What if we had like the Legion of the Damned, but Eldar?
All right. Well,
So
yeah,
cool.
we'll think about it. Eric, you've been working on some stuff too, right?
Yeah, I've been trying to paint. I got a set of these Zone Mortalis tiles, and I've been trying my best to paint one of them in a way that won't take forever, that I could replicate on others. And it's going okay. Trying to do some like kind of oil and enamel washes just to add some additional, I don't know, color modulation and such to the vast silver panels. But it's going okay. I mean, at some point, I kind of just want to move on, because as terrain, I don't really want it to detract from the models themselves. But
I like.
I don't know. So that's been
some
fun.
of the vents and stuff where you think there might be like hot air and stuff. There's like mold and stuff growing. Like that's
that looks cool.
It's a good idea.
My effort at it. I mean, I could try to do some more panel lining and such, but I feel it would take forever to do.
Probably would.
And I don't know if I want to.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, then it's also like that classic, what you just said about, do you make it super detailed and then your model gets more lost into the terrain?
Yeah,
It's like, is it the backdrop or is it the focal point? And it just
I mean,
depends.
the models I make are already drab enough. Like they'll get swallowed up in anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that. I know that feeling.
And I guess at this point, I feel I would rather maybe finish painting all of them to perhaps a level like this, and then maybe go in further to do more later. But I don't know. Maybe we at this point just want to move into the podcast stuff itself, because I feel that will be more interesting than me rambling on about painting silver tiles.
Yeah, let's do it.
Do it.
All right. So if everyone's ready, I'm just gonna kind of do my standard thing and start with the introduction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. 3, 2, 1, record. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dragged into Turbolasers, a Between the Bolter and Me podcast. This is episode 67, and I'm your host, Eric Wire, and I'm joined with my two brothers, Adam Wire.
Hey, everybody.
Greg Wire.
Hey, everyone.
And I'm excited to say our friend Vince, or perhaps better known as Dark Tech, is with us here tonight as well. Hey, Vince.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here.
Yeah, no, it's good to have you here, and just get an opportunity to talk with you a little bit about some of your work. I feel you're one of the more notable Ink 28 sort of hobbyists with a very kind of distinct style, and I think it'll be fun to talk a little bit with you sort of about that and just some other questions and such. But yeah, I mean, perhaps just with that in mind, just to get straight off into it, we could start with just a general thing of maybe you could talk a little bit about how you got into this hobby, and if there was sort of a time where you stopped and came back, and maybe why you did come back to begin with, if that is the case.
I feel that happens with most of us.
It's pretty much the exact same for me. I played back in maybe 3rd or 4th edition. I was back in when I was in middle school. I played I think every faction at the time. I went through a Eldar phase, an Orc, a Space Marine. I mean, I played them all. Tyrannid, actually, I think Tyrannid is my first, which is pretty funny. I haven't gone back to Tyrannids, but who knows? I've always thought about it. And then I played up until maybe middle of high school, maybe my sophomore year, and then kind of fell off. It was, not the coolest thing to do at the time, right? It was like one of those things.
But it sure is now.
It sure is now. Now I came out even to my coworkers about it now. It's big. Yeah, and so I don't know, a couple years back, maybe it was 4 or 5 years back now, I was talking to a friend, and the Games Workshop opened up by his house.
Oh.
Meanwhile, I had been kind of certain things would come up. I always have Warhammer in the back of my mind. I like the creative part of it, the story, all of that. And then I saw the new Skitarii models one day, online or something. And then we went into the GW store that opened up at my friend's house, and I bought a box.
Yeah,
I was like, that's it, and it's been ever since.
No, I think that the release of that army was, I feel, a pretty big moment for the hobby, because they finally, after a long time, started expanding on the Imperial and Mechanicus stuff, because I feel like forever it was just Space Marines and sort of Imperial Guard. So
yeah.
And they always talked about the Adeptus Mechanicus in the lore and the books and such, so it was neat for them to try to explore that more and actually make models for them.
Yeah. And they kind of went wild and making models of all sorts of stuff, Harlequins. And then, for the Imperial side, they then went and made the Custodes.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe we didn't need those.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
we got them for better or worse. But I feel the Mechanicus were something that they're such a cornerstone of the Imperium, that it's nice to finally have them. And it was also kind of, I feel, Darren Latham made them, I think. So it was sort of the start of him making a lot of models, then like the Gene Stealer cultists and all those things that were all relatively similar in scale, such that it really started to facilitate pretty relatively simple kit bashing and conversion to make weird, interesting things like Dark Mechanicum, that sort of thing. So
yeah, and honestly, the Skitarii were the first like Imperial, I guess the good guys that I was like, oh, I would play these guys because they don't look like normal, like super like good guys. They look kind of creepy and they were steampunky. It literally ticked all the boxes for me to say, all right, I'll buy a box and let's get back into this. And
well, so with that, like now you like do all sorts of crazy and neat conversions. When you got that first box of Skitarii, were you like converting them and stuff, or did you largely assemble them as they were?
And was there the desire to like play general 40K with them?
Yeah. So I don't even know what came first. It's kind of a blur, but Iron Sleet, I think their first invitational maybe came out when I first got back in. It was like at the same exact time. And so I saw some of those conversions. I had seen some work by like Kari and, like, and then I was on looking at the Convertorum back when that was the thing.
Well, he still posts on that a little. Not
does he really? I honestly haven't.
I feel like twice a year he posts something.
But so I had started converting right out the bat because I was like, these models that these people are making are just so cool. So my first Skitarii were like, they had, I gave them like the mechanical tentacles. I think my Alpha did, and then I made one of the Castellan robots. I just had like swapped its head out for like a cow skull.
Are these some of the first things on your Instagram? Are there pictures of them?
Yeah, here they are. Here they are.
Hell yeah.
So like the basic troops maybe are more or less traditional, but like if you look, my Alpha had some tentacles, and I tried to make some just creepy dark mech things.
Yeah, well, that's cool, and I mean, I feel it takes a little while to start really getting into conversions and testing the waters. In particular, if you don't have a wealth of kits and such, you are somewhat limited in like the easier things to do. And with like one or two boxes, it's hard to do a huge amount, particularly if you've never really done anything like sculpting, which I feel like who has,
right?
Until you get further into it.
Right. But these guys were so easy to just even buy a paint scheme and turn them into evil, like creepy looking, So
one of the things that I always liked about them, which I think is sort of funny, is since they have mechanical feet, they're sized a lot better than the typical like 40K combat boot and stuff. So it's like I feel if you did a little work, you could convert them into more reasonably sized, like actual boots. And like I always like that. Like they kind of have small feet. Like thank the Lord.
And the way that their feet are, you can essentially like kind of just chop off the first chunk of the feet. You know how they have like those like kind of 3-tiered layered feet? You can kind of just chop that front part off, and you're pretty.
Yeah, close. I mean, I remember around the time when they came out, one of the conversions, the first conversion I did with them, I just like cut off the leg below the knee and replaced it with the Elysian drop troop like legs, because they actually have smaller, nicer boots and stuff, and like it works really well. So they're good. They're great.
Did you play like games with them?
Yeah, we tried to play. Like my friend had bought, or he had like some old Space Marines or something. So we tried to play some iteration of 40K. And then actually, shortly after this, I got into old Necromunda, and that's where Isaac Weirding Way and I had met.
Okay, yeah, that's cool.
So were you playing in a campaign with Weirding Way?
Yeah. It was like a very short lived, but him and I had then obviously stayed and talked, up until now.
Wow.
Now we're, we see each other every once in a while.
Talk about an awesome Necromunda campaign with Weirding Way, and you like the best thing ever, probably.
It was really cool, and at the time, it was like he had already changed the way that I was doing conversions. He always talks about breaking things up into smaller blocks, and not just swapping an arm, but cut the arm into 3 pieces, and so it kind of changed the way. And like you can see him here, I started to kind of mess with parts and change things a little bit, even on these cultists that are based basically on the Empire Flagellants.
Well, so why don't we have that kind of emerge into like, how do you go about approaching making a miniature? Do you have like an idea of what you want to do? Do you sketch stuff out? Do you start with, all right, I see a part that I think I could do something cool with this? Is it some of all of those? Like, what do you do when you're trying to design something?
Yeah, so there's like a huge, for me, I do a little bit of drawing, but not as much as maybe when I first started doing this. Really what I do now is I'll create like an image board and just put together like I will shamelessly say I use Pinterest, honestly, and I'll create a board on there and it'll be like, I don't know, AdMech, whatever, new gang. And I'll just start looking for imagery that I want, this gang to look like. And honestly, you start looking at like images and you can start to put together like a theme and a feeling for these models like pretty quickly. So I think doing, that image boards are huge, and even you would come up with a couple themes. I'll have a general idea and then I'll really flesh it out with kind of doing image searches.
Yeah, well, and I think doing stuff like that, I think could be a helpful thing also if you're trying to set up a like kind of Inc 28 event or whatever, trying to establish a new setting or something of that nature. And you can obviously write some description of what the setting is, but having some like a mood board type thing with different sort of color schemes,
colors, exactly,
all that stuff, I think could go a long way to help people sort of get in that mood and sort of the same mindset.
Yeah.
Towards that end, like, is some of that just influenced by like, oh, GW just released this great Necromunda gang, like I need to do something with it, or are you more restrained?
No, I am really bad about stuff. Like I'll impulse buy new kits because there's like a sword out of there that I think I could use or something, and so I literally just bought the Night Haunts with the crazy huge broadswords because I was like, oh man, giving these to some of those what are they called, the Repentas from the sisters would be kind of crazy, like swap out
they would be better looking swords.
Yeah, so and so I don't know, it's sometimes I see a model from GW and I'm like, oh, this is going to be great. And I can sketch it out in my mind, essentially, because I've seen so many of the parts. I can quickly, in my head, put together a model because I have such an enormous inventory of parts now.
Yeah, I feel for me, it's often, sometimes as they release stuff, I'll buy some of the kits just because, like, I think down the road they'll be important in like converting stuff, because it's really nice to kind of just have some of the stuff to like physically look at, because a lot of times, particularly if you go by like just trying to find different shapes and stuff and like sizes, like Games Workshop isn't always super consistent with a lot of that stuff, so being able to like actually look at all of the stuff is helpful. So like, for instance, the little Eldar pirate that I'm working on, his like little pistol there, the barrel part that like forks like fans out backwards. That's just I cut off one of the cross guards from one of those Blade Geist models we were just talking about. Like that's what that is, and then I shaved it down, and so like when I was making that or started making, it's like, all right, just start looking around for the general shape and stuff to see if I can then like work and build on that. So it does.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It does sort of suck because like as you start buying all the stuff, like you have to have a place to put it, and I feel like now it's more like we have a lot of stuff, and it's like if people like on Instagram and stuff say like, "Hey, I'm looking for these pieces" or whatever, it's just like I think, do we
Please
have that?
take it.
Like, sure, we'll send that away. Like
It's funny. You mentioned that if you do, when you're sort of in the creative process making these mood boards, does that also sort of make it influence your decision on paint schemes and such? Is that a thing that you're thinking about pretty quickly in the process as you're building them, or is it something that comes a little bit later?
It's kind of it kind of depends, honestly. There are some of my like mood boards, and you'll see that like if you were to see them, the color scheme is very similar to the colors that you see in those boards. The other part is I think just my general style is a little bit more. There are a lot of neutrals and then a lot of rust and stuff. So my color schemes tend to all be sort of the same, where I could probably put all my models in one location and they would kind of look like an army.
Yeah, you are building a 40K army right now. It's just slowly increasing. Like
yeah.
It's
Isaac,
true.
he always tells me, and I should have done it this year. He's done it before to play in like the Adepticon 40K tournaments.
Yeah,
because really I could. And him and I have even talked about playing a 40K game together. Just all obviously proxied models and just these insane.
Yeah, that would be pretty neat.
it's a good idea.
It might happen. It might happen.
Do you have, this is sort of going along with the just creation such, are there any particular large inspirations for you, like in terms of maybe movies, books, art, any of those sorts of things that kind of influence the stuff you're doing?
Yeah, and it like that, it really depends on the project. Will depend on sort of the imagery I have in mind. Like I guess I always think of like the new Blade Runner, that rust, like that scene where they're in just like essentially those piles of scrap. That's always in the back of my mind, right? Like I'm always pulling up that image.
Yeah.
So that's like some of it, and even sometimes like when I'm doing a bigger ship or something, I'll look to like Star Wars, and their ship design. It just kind of it depends on the project, really, though. And then obviously, what's popular at the time. It's kind of the models that even the community are creating can have huge impacts on the stuff that I start to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, too, because I feel like Instagram and other social media things have certainly, I feel, helped a lot, inspire a lot of people, and like even like unknowingly, you'll take like influences and stuff from all over the place. Yeah,
wait, so it's like Baby Yoda gonna be included in one of your models soon?
It already is now.
Like way ahead of you, Greg.
No. My girlfriend wants me to do that, to be honest, but I told her I can't do it. I won't do it.
Well, Kiri's already basically did that with his Pilgrim War band. You just couldn't see him in there.
That's true.
Wow. Yeah. You mentioned that you kind of, when you started, it was kind of around the time where Iron Sleet started to maybe did their first invitational, and the Convertorum was more actively, or was just more active.
Yeah.
Did that then sort of shifted, at least partially, some of your work to kind of fit into that Inc. 28 sort of thing? Like, how quickly did you start to actually build war bands and think about trying to run your own events? Because at this point you've run a few and certainly been involved in a bunch. Like, how did you kind of get into that?
So I think it was, I had always kind of wanted to do, I mean, after seeing the Inc. 28 style events, I wanted to do that. That's kind of when I got into Necromunda. It wasn't quite the same. The people we had played with were, you know, the more typical like gamer, you know what I mean, as opposed to the narrative part of it, which is totally fine. It's just, you know, people's preference. But it was kind of shortly after. The hard part was finding people who also wanted to play in these style games. You know, like some of the images you were just looking through, they were things that were between Isaac and I, and so they were never a full fleshed out campaign. It was just like, let's create a cool little scenario, right? Yeah. The one I can think of off the top of my head was I had created like a undead tech group that were on some backwater type planet, and his navigators crashed, you know, into that planet, and so we kind of played it off like that. And it was like a single game with some custom rules that we made up on the spot. So that's it was cool. You know, it was kind of one of those things. It was, and then all this, I don't know what inspired me to say, let me try to cram like 8 grown men and 1,000 tables into my tiny apartment. Like, a
sensible thing to do.
Some like stroke of insanity happened for me, and I said, let's do it. Let's invite everyone over, or, you know, a bunch of people over to try to play this, you know, an actual game here. And that was that Mars Solum game. That was kind of the first one I had hosted.
Yeah, and you had, when you started to build some of that terrain and such, was that always sort of in the back of your head that you wanted to invite people and do that, or was it just something that you started to do and eventually realized why not?
Yeah, it was like that. It went the other way. It was like the Mars Solum group was born. There was a group of people who wanted to create this, so I said, okay, I'll just make a bunch of stuff for myself because I like doing it. Maybe Isaac will come over, or maybe I can convince some of my friends to come over, and we'll like just use this terrain. And then I started making so much of it that it was like, I could probably host an event. And then so it happened.
For the people that maybe aren't familiar with Mars Solum, can you, like, Vince, describe like the setting behind it?
Yeah, it was like a water. I mean, essentially, it was a water world for 40K. There were some like great floods that had happened. The whole planet is covered in water now. So there's like these remnant cities and things coming out of the water, all very ramshackle and, you know, the traditional post-apocalyptic style, maybe kind of Borderlands-y. I don't know. So that was this setting. You can see it's not as, one of the things, you know, that I kind of reflected on after is it doesn't necessarily read as 40K. It kind of just reads as traditional sci-fi post-apocalyptic. And so more of my builds since then have been trying to, you know, mix in more traditional 40K themes.
Well, in some sense, I think it's kind of, I mean, it's not like super futuristic, like cyberpunky sort of stuff. So I feel that is good. But I mean, the universe is a big place. Like, I don't think every single planet has the exact same sector Mechanicus terrain. You know what I mean? So I feel the fact that you were kind of brave and went into creating this terrain without like, what's all these plastic pieces I can get and modify them slightly. I think that is sort of refreshing that you kind of took some scale model stuff and all sorts of different things, and then took a lot of kind of scale modeling, weathering techniques and sort of merged them. I feel you were one of the first people that I saw really readily trying to apply some of those techniques to 40K, which, I mean, like a lot of people do it now, but I don't think it was maybe as widespread as it is now back when you were doing it. And I think that's neat. How was it actually playing on the board? Like, 'cause I feel
Go ahead.
any of those sorts of, even Necromunda with like the different levels and all that stuff, it can be challenging to actually have space to move models around.
Totally.
And that I assume had to have come up at least to a point.
Yeah. And it's like funny, you create this huge thing and then like the majority of the people are like killing each other down at that little tiny flat area.
Yeah, the
like
little
not even touching
platform.
anything else. You know what I mean? Like that's how these games go. It's you spend all this time making this intricate terrain and then people like hang out and die on a bridge that you spent 4 minutes on.
Like, I'm not fucking going up there to that top little place.
Exactly.
Like, I won't
it's
be
like
able
not
to shoot
conducive.
anyone there. Like,
Why would I go there?
It'll
Exactly.
it'll take like 4 turns just to climb up there because of how these rules work.
Exactly. It's like exactly
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So as again, something I learned from there is like trying to make terrain look cool and playable is like a pretty tough balance. And I feel like if it's too playable, then you know, like you have some, like you can't get as detailed and intricate and weird levels and things. But you know,
Weirding Way made a flying whale creature for one of those games. Can you describe like how that played into it, or like maybe the story behind the game that incorporated that, or even a neat story that came out of one of the games?
Yeah, I'll try to. So the way that game was played was pretty interesting, and it set the groundwork for Carrion Pass. But what we had done was we created this essentially like a runway of water like table pieces, and they were super narrow. It was probably 24 inches by like, I don't know, 6 feet long or something. And the way the board would work was like a scrolling board.
Okay.
So like we'd move the terrain back, kind of like a Gorka Morka style thing. And so it was like a whale hunt. And so we were, you know, Isaac had created these really cool rules for the whale with like you'd be able to target its fins and its like different essentially its different abilities were different weapons. So like you could shoot at its tail and disable the tail. So it was a really cool event, and it was, I don't remember if we did a free-for-all, if we did teams, but everyone had like a secret objective that I'd come up with a bunch of objectives, and the objectives would be they would force people to interact. So one objective was kill the whale, the other one was like, you know, someone would get that, and someone else would say, you know, someone else would be fight or kill the whale poachers. You know, and so you would get some people defending the whale that way, or then, you know, someone else with something simple like, you know, come in and steal the whale carcass, that sort of thing. They were like these sort of things that would force people to interact. So it was cool. It was a fun event.
Yeah, no, that sounds cool. And yeah, I guess since then you've been involved in a bunch of kind of the Inc. 28 stuff going on at Adepticon, like the Palatine Spires, Carrion Pass, like you mentioned, right? And all of those probably played out a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Which I guess is an interesting thing I feel about a lot of these sort of 28 events. Like the rule system kind of change a bunch based on what's popular at the time, or just what rules people vaguely remember.
Yeah, and it's like they always they use like Necromunda as a core, and then it's constantly changing these like side rules, with Carrion Pass probably being the most elaborate new rule set. There was all kinds of crazy movement mechanics and stuff that were created based on like X-Wing and similar things like that. It was pretty cool. And then even Gelida had some pretty, like, it was used Necromunda as its core, but then there were all kinds of rules for the mechs and points and that sort of thing to build these mechs, because it was really more of a mech-based game. So every game has been a pretty cool learning experience, and I think honestly the games have gotten better and better every single event. It's a more fun, and most of the time you realize the more rules you have, the actual less fun people have, because most people just want to roll dice and like see their models in a cool backdrop. And
I
talk
feel
about what they're doing.
particularly because it's not like it's your weekly gaming group and you're going to keep doing it and like you want that all that depth, because they're usually sort of single events. Even if you provide like sort of rules, pamphlets or whatever, not everyone necessarily reads them or have different levels of exposure to the various base games, that it can be challenging.
Yeah, exactly.
You brought up Gelida. We actually had Majos Bure on the podcast, I don't know, a few episodes ago, and he talked at length about the sort of narrative elements that he put in place for the game and all that sort of stuff, that I don't think there was a particularly great way to learn about that until sort of he talked about it, just because a lot of the coverage was just through Instagram, which is, kind of difficult to convey large amounts of information. I kind of wonder, since you kind of hosted the second part of this Gelida story, how did you kind of work with Bjor to sort of continue that story and impart narrative stuff into the event?
Yeah, so him and I had been kind of in contact. We had a group of people. I think there was someone else from the UK as well in the group, and essentially Cody Magos Bure was creating these. He had written up essentially this big narrative that he had that happened in the Utah event, and all these outcomes from that that he had then sent to me. And essentially I was trying to guide then the story of what had happened with those weird mutant guys that he had. And essentially there were two outcomes for them in my game at my event. And one was they breached the walls of of Marus, the city. That's that huge wall that I had built. And if they breach the wall, they send a communication up, or it sends the people in the town send a communication up. It's like a last futile attempt to say, like, there's some insane chaos going on here, and essentially the planet gets nuked. The Imperium gets the message and blows up the whole planet.
Exterminatus.
Exactly. And then if they hold off at the gate, I forgot what happened, what the other outcome was, but essentially it was the same thing. So either way, the planet gets nuked. And then the next setting was then based on like a post-apocalyptic Gelida, where like everything's in ruins. I think. But then aside from that, there was a lot of just other lore that had gone into these, those like mutants that weren't necessarily, Cody was trying to express that they weren't necessarily chaos in the way that we think of it. And they were like, it was like a mutation that was, it like caused themselves harm. And it was very deep, actually. I wish I could remember more of it. But I think it's something that he plans on releasing, that Gelida Codex. Maybe can talk him into putting at least some of that background into.
Yeah, I think that would be exciting.
Yeah.
Just to hear more of kind of the lore, because there's talking with him as well. It was clearly a lot of lore there, which I think adds a lot of exciting depth to all the cool miniatures. But I guess for the Gelida stuff, you made a whole ton of awesome mechs and
a big Wendigo sort of thing. Can you tell me something about that?
Yeah, so those Yeti big There's actually 2 of them, and they were like an NPC that ran through 2 of the events. One of them was in one event there was actually like a Yeti sort of hunt, and then in the second event of the day they came out of the ground like they were summoned by chaos and came out of the snow and tore everything apart essentially there.
Yeah, that's cool. One thing, like, I think from what I remember talking with Cody about it, in the first event that he had held, there really wasn't any like traditional like chaos forces and stuff, and that only really started to come to light in the event that you had shown. And like that was one of the things that I thought was particularly striking and cool about some of the stuff you had made. Like you made a series of walkers, some of which were very clearly like had a lot of like chaos influences and stuff, but they all of it was sort of pitched or presented in a way that kind of has more of a less comical horror and a less comical chaos vibe than what you I feel like typically see in like 40K. There's sort of like a like almost like a horrifying like barbarism and stuff to the models that I think really kind of like helps elevate the setting and make it like when you see some of these it's like, oh shit, this is like serious and not like feel most
not fleshy hell brutes and obliterators and such.
I'm glad it gave that that sort of feeling because that's really what I wanted. And so essentially the whole thing with Gelida is like it's of this very depressing planet, right? And so even the idea behind this is like even the chaos gods have essentially turned their back on their followers here. So it's kind of like a, you know, I didn't even know what to align this with. It's kind of just, I don't know, maybe unaligned, but it's like sort of nerdly, right? Because it's like decrepit and torn apart, but it's really more derelict and it's almost sad, right? It's like crying. The skull is like crying blood. It looks like it's in pain, like it's like this slow walking, lumbering thing. And I just wanted it to look essentially like it had been abandoned.
And I like
all these chaos.
I like how it also looks sort of like it was a functional thing that they could have actually used before kind of the chaos manifested itself. But then the fact that once it did start to manifest itself, it's not like all the inhabitants know, like the corn loves like skulls, and this is what all corn followers look like. You know, that it would manifest different ways based on kind of the cultures there and that sort of thing, which admittedly, even like Warcry, their newer setting, there were all those kind of different chaos cultist tribes and whatnot, and they're all chaotic, but they're sort of manifested in different ways, and I think that's sort of refreshing. Like they don't have to be cookie cutter the 4 different gods, and I think it was a good way of kind of depicting that slow downturn into chaos. So it's good.
Thank you.
I think it's also interesting, like you also like play around with like sort of like lighting and like it looks like you actually put like lights and stuff in some of like the mechs and stuff, and I think that kind of also like kind of helps add kind of a weird like haunting like luster and stuff to a lot of the stuff.
What inspired you to try to string those lights up and whatnot?
So all my models are, well, not all of them, but I love the gimmicky stuff like adding lights to my models. I just think it adds a lot of like, I don't know, character to even in the game. It's a little bit more immersive. Anyone who's played with me knows I like love making if something like breaks or dies or one of these mechs blows up, I always do like the tea light with the smoke, like cotton coming out of it, you know? So I just think it's a fun way to just add a little bit more immersion, really.
For the immersion aspect, like even I think you spend a lot of time taking good sort of moody photographs, which I think helps just people looking at, the Instagram pictures and such, helps them kind of get immersed in it, even if they're obviously like not at the games themselves. Like, do you spend a lot of time with photography and thinking about how you want to do that sort of thing?
Kind of, yeah. I can't say like I'm a photographer, and as a hobby or anything, but for me, because I play so few games, like I like showing a story through these little, through the photography, through these moody pictures. It it sort of like creates a mood board, for everyone, right? Even for myself, I can, like, when I create these pictures, it just kind of tells like a little story in itself right there. And I like that a lot. And the more confident I've become with my work, the more I try to inject to taking these, one of my favorite parts, weird, super sci-fi kind of crazy models, and then trying to make them look like they could be in a movie or like a backdrop in a movie or something. So
yeah, it's a cool idea, and I feel it sort of helps bring to life some of the ideas and
make it seem like it's not just a miniature war game. Like you're building a setting, making characters, making something memorable beyond just some little toy soldiers.
Right. I mean, and because ultimately I play, like I said, so little, or, I spend so much time and energy thinking about Warhammer and like planning things out, and honestly, time, energy, and money, let's be honest. And it's like, so for me, it's like what I lack in the actual gaming and using the things for what it's for. It's like I create these little scenes, and that makes me happy for a short time, and then I'm like, okay, let's make a new scene and a new story.
Yeah.
So.
No, I hear that. That's cool. I like that.
Would you like to, like, you're gonna be at least participating in one of the events at this upcoming Adepticon? Do you have any words about that, or if people are going to be at Adepticon, what to look out for, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So about the setting, I can't speak too much because it's pretty open. But there are more recently, there's been a couple rules packets and things that have been developed about it. There's also kind of a generic, or not generic, but like a general setting that this all takes place in. In terms of what to look for, and if you're going to Adepticon, the way that it's going to be set up is everyone's going to be playing on these small 2x2 boards. So I think it will be probably the most not accepting, but yeah, essentially, if you want to join and play just a couple games, you can, because the style of the setting is really this. Everyone who's bringing a board will create their own few special rules for the board, and then you can play on this 2x2 board, and you can either be done, or maybe we'll have some rollover effects from one game to another.
Well, can people bring their own models, or is it you are providing the models for them to use?
So that is, I mean, I guess really I have enough war bands and things that I could bring, and I probably will bring more than just the ones I plan on using. So I'd say if you want to play and you only have a couple models, I can help fill out the rest of your war band because I have a billion. But the general idea is that people would come with their own war band at the very least.
Is this, like, do you know what's this? I'm gonna say setting called? Oh yeah, I think Wordsylvania actually put it in the chat here.
Relicta Stellus.
Yeah, and yeah. Is this event, like, is it like one of the official ones that people kind of buy tickets to, or is it more like an open gaming thing?
So hopefully I don't get busted for saying this, but I've never signed up for any official Adepticon event. I've gone the last 3 or 4 years. I just go and hang out at the tables.
I'm pretty sure that that's fine. It's only if you want to like take a class or whatever, you have to get like a ticket. But like open gaming and stuff,
or play in one of the tournaments or something,
right? Which I've never done, and I'm not even on the official. So there is an official Inc. 28 event at Adepticon, which is pretty cool. That it's expanding into kind of more mainstream, I guess. But I'm not a part of it. They filled up so quickly. So
yeah. But I
I
think
won't
that's
be there.
kind of a neat thing, even just this style to like just have a bunch of people make different boards, bring models there, and it ultimately is a nice way just to sort of network and meet other people who are interested in this sort of smaller aspect of the Games Workshop hobby. And also, you know, maybe meet some people that you already have been following on Instagram. And I think that's kind of a nice way to realize that the community is pretty welcoming, and I think that's neat. And I guess maybe almost speaking a little to that, do you have any sort of input or thoughts on how to go about sort of getting involved in Inc. 28 events or that sort of thing, based on kind of how you started it, or any sort of tips that you might want to say?
Yeah, so I would say as a general rule that the Inc. 28 like community, at least at all these Adepticon events, have just been super great people and super open and really willing to kind of let anyone join and hear about what's going on. I mean, just the number of people who come up at Adepticon and ask what's going on, it's like we might as well have like a ready response, because there's so many. If you want to get involved in any of these things, really, it's just like don't hesitate to reach out to the people that are, hosting the events. If you don't think you can make it, people are really good about, sending in. If you want to send an NPC and you just want to see it on the board and like kind of be part of the experience that way, that's totally doable. I know for like Gelida, we had a huge number of people sending stuff in. And I felt like I played more with other people's models than my own in that event. But it was pretty cool. We actually did, I think we got everyone's models who had sent them in involved in the game somehow. And so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's nice.
And I think maybe people are nervous about reaching out or don't know, I don't know if they think it's an exclusive thing. And I would say majority of situations, it's just an event that was created, and the people that were invited were just because they were in contact already, right? Like these events that keep happening, it's like every year at Adepticon, the group expands and that group continues to make new games. Like I think at the end of Carrion Pass, we like went out for dinner or drinks or something after, and we're already talking about the next event, right? Like and then everyone's included in that next event. That's why this year's Adepticon is like this pretty inclusive big event that is open for everyone to play.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of a neat way to try and encourage more people to like start and become involved, because certainly a lot of the events that traditionally, the Inc. 28 events traditionally have been like a pretty close-knit group of people, but I feel as the years have gone by, it's like expanded a lot to like allow other people to join in and send stuff. And I feel now the notion of at some of the larger like gaming conventions, just people setting up like events and stuff there is kind of nice, because that is could be a pretty accessible way to like get in and start doing some of the stuff if you already are sort of like interested in stuff like that and going to different events.
Because like a lot of people that are involved in this hobby, like at least if you're in the United States, like Adepticon's a pretty big convention anyway, such that it seems like it's a nice place to hold these sorts of things, because a lot of people were already coming, or there's just a lot of information about hotels and places to stay, that sort of thing. So I think that's neat. And I mean, I guess admittedly too, with the like that Inc. 28 magazine that actually you were kind of involved in, I think that's also maybe been a helpful thing for this as well. Just there's something you can kind of point to that people could kind of read about and learn a little bit about what this is sort of about. But I guess maybe we can like ask a few more questions here before we sort of wrap this up. Maybe this is shifting gears a bit, but is there like when like converting or painting, is there one particular tool or paint or something that like you really gravitate towards and is like you really like a lot and would encourage other people to use or to consider?
Yeah, so I use a lot, and well, maybe a little bit less than I used to, but weathering powders I'm pretty big on. I think they add a really cool texture. And
that's actually a good, like, how do you apply the pigments and how do you like fix them or that sort of thing?
So it depends. And I will tell you right now, I don't even think I'm doing it right. But it's worked for me this far. But essentially, so it depends. If I'm doing like a super rusty area, corners on bigger type models, I'll like dump a bunch of super glue and then kind of stipple on weathering powders with like a really crappy brush. And it kind of creates like this gross, grimy, gritty texture. So that's one way I'll apply weathering powders. Another way I'll do it is like I will wet a brush and mix weathering powder with like a little bit of paint, and I'll like brush it on so it goes on super thick, and then it dries like it looks like caked on mud. So that's another way. And then sometimes I'll just take like a floofier brush and I'll put it in the weathering powder and I'll like apply to the bottoms of the model. And it just kind of sticks if like the brush is a little bit damp. The problem is, I guess over time it could wear off. I've had mixed results with spraying my models at the end with like a matte varnish. The issue with that is that sometimes it kind of takes everything down a couple notches.
No, because I feel the nice thing about the pigments is it adds that sort of different texture and look, and it's not just like this. And that's, if you put that on and then just spray it with a thick coat of matte varnish, it just like kind of removes the effect.
It's like paint again.
And I think that's also like if you mix the pigments too much with other like acrylic paints or washes or whatever, that can also sometimes minimize it. But like I think particularly if you're not like, you know, playing with the models in tournaments all the time, like you probably, like you sort of suggested, don't even necessarily have to fix it at all.
Right.
Like, it'll slowly maybe work itself off, but I mean, let's be honest, a lot of us are just kind of displaying these models. So
Exactly. I can say right now, I have like all of my models. I've never used a traditional fixative. The most I've done is this matte varnish thing, and they all look just as rusty and grimy as when I first made them. So you know.
But no, I think it's another thing that it's kind of fun to work with, and it can add. Well, just a different texture, such that it's not like every single surface looks exactly the same. Like,
do you have a brand of pigments that you get? They're like, because probably some listeners maybe haven't used them at all.
Yeah, so I use a lot of Vallejo, and then I've got this one by Humbrol that I've honestly it's like kind of my most used one. I got it on, I think, Amazon. But it's just it's Humbrol weathering powder, and it's, I think, dark earth. And this is probably the one I use the most. Like if you looked at this, you would. I mean, all my models are kind of covered in it. It's like this really nice dark brown. and it mixes really nice with black.
HUMBROL, Humbrol.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, the ones I have a bunch of Vallejo ones because they were the easiest ones to find where I am. But I mean, I think ultimately, almost any company that makes them, they're basically the same thing. They're just the pigments without like any sort of binding in it. But so that's cool, and I think it certainly is worth experimenting with.
Do you use any like oils or enamels and stuff like that?
I've said I was going to use oils since I don't even know a couple Adepticons ago, and I just haven't done it.
Yeah.
But I'd like to. I think I'd really like them, and everyone tells me I'd really like them, so I just need to do it. It's just one of those things where I feel like I'm getting really comfortable with my current techniques. And so then to add like a new variable in there is like, well, am I going to screw something up? And chances are probably not.
Well, I feel with the oils, the chances of you screwing anything up is very minimal because you can, with like, you add a little of the oil somewhere and then you kind of spread that around and thin it with like a thinner. So like you can almost take most of it off and it doesn't dry very quickly either. So you have a lot of...
There's a lot of
working time and room with it. So I haven't used them a ton, but I've certainly started sometime. Like if I want to do like weathering and stuff on like armor, and I don't want like huge text, like a ton of like visible texture and stuff, oils and enamels and stuff work really well for that. And then like I feel you could then let all of that kind of settle and dry. And then if you still wanted to add just a little more, you could then go and add some pigments and stuff here and there. So like, I think it could pretty easily complement essentially what anyone's already doing with like their painting and stuff.
I guess towards that end, like I've been working on this one Zone Mortalis tile, and most of the kind of weathering stuff I did were with some enamels and oils, because like trying to use like Nuln Oil or any of those acrylic washes on like a large flat surface is kind of terrible because they dry so quickly that you so easily get tide marks and things like that, particularly if any of the paint, if it's like a matte paint without like, it's just so hard to apply anything well. Whereas with like oils, you can apply, or an enamel, you can put a whole lot of it on and then just kind of basically remove it all with like white spirits or thinner, and you just have so much more control, and like it's hard to ruin anything, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's easier to go back and forth without having to repaint.
I just didn't even know like what brand. I think I've heard MIG. I think that's.
I feel
was telling me about that.
The easiest ones I feel to find are either Ammo of MIG or AK Interactive, at least in the United States anyway.
Yeah.
And probably AK Interactive's the easiest, but most of them I've just ordered stuff on Amazon.
So one thing, like, so MIG makes these like what they call these little like oil brushers, where they have like a little vial, and they work super well because you don't have to squeeze out paint or whatever. You just dab a little bit randomly around on the model, and it's all nicely contained, and then you can go back with like older brushes and thinner and stuff. So I feel like I have a bunch of like tubes of like oil paints and stuff, which work well, but it's a lot easier to just like waste like tons of it, because like once it's out of the bottle, it's out of the bottle.
And a little bit goes a long way too, since you're gonna probably thin it a bunch. So, so I would say it's worth trying. I guess the question I have for you: have you considered using something other than super glue yet? The last time I talked with you, I had the discovery that you had like never used like extra thin cement or something like that, and I was kind of taken aback.
I just bought plastic glue. No joke. It's in the mail. It's on the way to my house
Okay.
for the first time.
It's like, oh shit, going on their podcast. They're gonna ask about this.
I'm not kidding. I was like, I have to do this because if I don't do it, I'm gonna get booed off.
So I think you'll like it.
Well, you don't really have to feel too bad because I feel for me like most of my hobby life has been spent just using super glue, and only in the last few years have I started using plastic glue. And I mean, even now, like I use it sparingly. So one of the more interesting things that I don't even remember why I started doing it, but if you get like Tamiya makes this like extra thin cement in a little bottle and it has like a tiny little brusher. I've found if you sculpt something with like green stuff and such, once it's hardened, I will often put a thin layer of that over what I sculpted, and that kind of like almost like gives it more of like a matte finish to it, and I find it's easier to like look at stuff. And so I've just started doing that, and that's not even using it as like glue or anything. But on top of that, if you are gluing certain plastic things together, it gives you a little more play in attaching some things. You do have to be careful. It's not always the best if you're gluing really tiny things, because if you add too much of the stuff, it will start melting stuff, and if you apply too much pressure, like it can be bad.
You can just like mash the piece, right, or like whatever.
Yeah, and then like melted plastic will like start bubbling out of the sides and stuff, kinda. But yeah, you have to be careful. Also, for instance, on that the like Eldar guy that I'm working with, when I glued the little top barrel part to the gun, like there I used the plastic glue because you can place it on, and like I'm really particular about trying to get everything sort of straight and everything, or as straight as I can do with something so small.
Yeah.
And if I added too much of the stuff, like it could have easily ruined everything. But it works better. Like if I use super glue here, you'll add a bunch of the super glue and you place it, and if you didn't place it right, it's going to be hard to pry them apart without bending or destroying whatever small thing you made.
So it's interesting because I use super glue, and it looks like Eli said the same thing, but like I'll use super glue because it's not as permanent in my mind. So
I understand.
Like when I'm like I feel like if it's something bad, I can just break it apart super easy. Whereas plastic glue, like don't you create a stronger bond?
Yeah, you melt that shit together.
Yeah.
In my experience with the plastic glue, it really depends on how gung ho you go about it. Like if you use a lot of the thin cement and stuff, that's typically the only thing I really use. It's sucked into like the seams and stuff. And then the majority of the seal is around the edge. So if you still have to break something off, it's often not that hard to do. It's just you'll break it off and then it'll look a little different than the super glue. But most of the time you can still pretty easily get the stuff apart unless you really
push them together. Yeah.
Push them together and put a lot of the glue there. Like GW and Games Workshop and other stuff like I have this like liquid cement for plastic models made by Model Master. It has like a little aluminum applicator tip, and that's just serious shit. Like you would put some on, and this really melts the fuck out of stuff. And if you put a little dab to glue an arm on, then that is going to be a lot harder to get stuff off.
Yeah.
But if you're using it more sparingly with like the little applicator brush for some of this thin cement, It still gives you a little more flexibility to take stuff apart. And particularly if you're working on really small things, like I was showing you with this Eldar model, it's much easier to just, you take the little applicator brush out, dab off almost all of the glue, and then just paint a tiny amount on, and then you put the two pieces together, and already it starts to sort of cling together, but not in like a permanent way. So
yeah, it's good. Well, we can probably stop waxing on about how great it is, and you'll just have to.
I'll tell you what, if my next models look like a big Nurgle blob of just melted plastic, I'm coming for you guys.
Yeah.
Those motherfuckers.
Yeah. Well.
Scheme. No, I'm sure it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Maybe as a last question, do you have any, other than kind of your Adepticon stuff, do you have any other kind of projects that you're excited or thinking about doing in 2020?
Yeah. So there is another one, which is kind of making it difficult for me to focus on what I'm supposed to be doing right now. Aside from a slow burn sisters battle type army that I'm kind of playing with, like maybe they're touched with chaos, I don't know. There's an event that's going to be held with about essentially kind of like a Shadow of Colossus type event. So it's going to have these massive terrain / beasts. That's gonna, the way I see it is going to be similar to kind of like the what was the event that happened in the UK with what was one of the ships, like the Rotberg? It was like all of the big, huge walking ships.
Rothsam Secundus or something like that. Called that, yeah.
So the way I think it's going to be kind of like that, only in a AOS 28.
Okay.
setting. So that will be coming more, I think, after Adepticon.
That sounds
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really pumped for that. And it'll be cool because AOS has kind of not been touched still, even though there's the groups for it and everything. It's kind of one of those things.
Yeah, it's not nearly as common as Ink 28 and such.
But with Warcry, I haven't played Warcry yet. I have all the stuff for it, of course, but I haven't played.
Like everyone.
Like everyone, yeah. I've heard it's kind of fun, so, and not that hard to play.
I've played 6 or so games of it. I play with a group of people here. It's pretty
obviously
good.
Not me.
Yeah?
Yeah, obviously not my brothers. I'm not playing with them. But it's pretty good. The games are pretty fast. Nearly all of them are either 3 or 4 turns. So you have very well defined objectives that change between the games sort of randomly most of the time. And those objectives and the setups vary pretty heavily, and it does sometimes create from some really swingy, sometimes kind of bullshit games where it's like, oh, your opponent, they have to destroy all of the models in your dagger, and and that person's dagger is just 2 guys that just happen to be deployed 6 inches away from all the rest of the shit, and it's okay, well, first turn, I get priority, and I charge my ogre and demolish all of your shit, and it's okay, you won, cool.
Let's play again.
Or then other ones, it's depending on what, I'm playing the Sisters of Sigmar that I made for Mordheim. I'm using them as iron golems. And the iron golems and stuff, they're sort of one of the slower war bands in the thing, as are orcs and some of the other stuff. But some of the other faster ones can move a lot faster, so it's some of the scenarios are really dependent on moving and finding objectives and stuff. And then each game you randomly draw like an event card where weird things can happen. Like it can rain blood, or it can be like you're in like a murky swampland that lowers your movement by an inch. And it's like, well, fuck. Like, well, now I can't get anywhere.
Yeah, I can't move anything. Yeah.
And it's like, and their fucking warband has all their models have flying. So like, whatever, who cares? And then
okay.
So
I think it's
fine because it's not really like a serious tournament type thing. And most of the time, like if you lose a game, like I feel of all the games that I've played, I've pretty much either lost or like had a draw on like almost all of them. And most of the games, it comes down to the final turn based on like one small thing. So most of them are pretty close. So like they're not. Most of the games aren't really like a feel bad thing. The one thing I will say, as you play in a campaign, as you win battles and play battles, you get like glory points, I think they're called, and you can then use them to conquer more territories. And as you conquer more territories, that awards you more resources to get larger and larger warbands. So if you come in a little later or don't win a lot of games, like you don't have nearly as many like points to expand your army. So I feel like my warband, like the past few games I've played, my army has been like around 150 points lower in points than like everyone else. So like they're able to get like another ogre or like
I think
three other guys.
I think with the new sort of rule update thing, like the annual or something, I think they changed some of the campaign stuff such that maybe that's not a problem.
Yeah,
but regardless, we don't have to keep talking about Warcry.
Yeah, let's stop talking about Warcry.
But I think it seems like the rule system is simple and quick, and I think just that aspect of it, I think, could maybe be modified for an Ink 28 thing, just such that it's not so bogged down and like, what are these special rules? What is this? It's more just symbols, a few simple things, not just like, oh, roll to hit, roll to wound, roll to save. Like the fact that that's all streamlined into one roll, I could see that system being nice for these sorts of narrative games because it's more focused on quickly doing fun, cool things, crazy stuff happening, and playing more games rather than just one long game that takes 8 hours. And so, But who knows? We'll see. We'll see. But I guess perhaps with that, do you have any last things you'd like to say? Anything you'd like to plug or anything like that?
I'd say the only thing I have to plug is maybe I'll say Adepticon. If you're on the fence about going, just go. Honestly, if you're worried about not being officially signed up for any event, still go. It's worth it just going to meet the people in real life, like the Ink 28 community, because it's really pretty cool to be so immersed in a group of people that are just equally obsessed with like weird cool bits and making weird little models, and I think it seems like it's pretty unlike some of the other just general community because it's so based on like the art side and the narrative side, and so it attracts a pretty interesting group of people. So definitely, if you're thinking about going and you're on the fence, go.
Well, so that's a good thing to know because that was something that we were wondering about because this, I think, will be our first year going to Adepticon. Did we need to buy tickets for shit? And
based on what you've said, it doesn't seem like
Yeah, I don't think so. I've never done it.
And so that's refreshing. And like the thing, kind of as you said too, like I'm most excited about just meeting up with old friends and meeting new people and all that, I think is like an exciting aspect of it. So,
and it's just seeing people's models in person and being able to talk to people right then and there instead of over a Instagram or whatever. It's really cool. You learn a ton every time we meet up as a group. I just feel like I'm constantly learning new techniques and thinking about new ways to do things. So it's really cool.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. It's coming up fast. You better start working on your warband.
I know. I
mean,
think
likewise.
a ramshackle group of stuff that had been half started for a long time.
Well, I guess if anyone isn't following you, they can follow you at Dark Tech on Instagram and maybe start slowly seeing some of what will end up being there. Though I can't imagine too many people listening to our podcast wouldn't already be following you, but who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? Yeah, but I mean, I guess with that, thanks for joining us on this podcast here. It was really nice to hear your insight and just talk to you about the hobby and Ink 28 and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, it was honestly a lot of fun to be here and talk to you guys. So thanks.
Yeah, all right. Well, hopefully we can have you on again sometime, maybe even like after Adepticon to debrief and talk about how everything went.
I'd totally do that. That'd be a fun one.
Yeah, but all right. Again, thank you for joining us. And I guess everybody keep enjoying the hobby, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right. So this is where we'll cut the podcast portion of it. But yeah, so I think that went well enough.
Yeah.
I think so. Was there anything you guys wanted to ask that you didn't ask?
I mean, I don't think anything like in particular. I mean, I feel we could talk at length about just modeling related stuff, like your cool Gelida Walker thing. Where did the skull come from?
That skull came from, so there's this artist I found at some art fair who makes skull like jewelry and rings.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so this was a resin. He makes like bronze and cast ones, but then he also makes like resin ones. And so it was like $12 or something. Scooped it up. I was wearing it for a while and I was like, oh, I want to buy a real, like a bronze one.
Yeah.
So when I do that, I'll repurpose this into a model. And it works. I mean, it fit perfectly in there. And then I just added the tusks from some, I think it was like the side.
That's cool. Nordic Miniatures, cool. He does a lot of jewelry making for like skulls and skeleton like stuff. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that stuff. Have you seen like the Mordheim ring he made?
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, he's made all sorts of stuff. Like when at the Mordheim 2020, we spent, or 2019, we spent a bunch of time with him, and it was cool to hear him like kind of talk about how he goes about making those rings and all that stuff. But I guess Eli asked you, what's your favorite Adventure Time character?
I don't know. I think I really liked the Lich. I thought he was really cool looking, and I liked Death, even though he was in like 3 episodes.
I saw one of those part of that episode where like there's a music battle with Death.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's
got
great.
Like a cool, deep, raspy voice. Yeah, it's a cool episode.
It's like it was fucking awesome.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie.
Crazy Adventure Time cosplays, honestly. That's a side thing I've been.
Yeah, well, that's something maybe I was interested in asking. Like, you make some like kind of props and cosplay stuff. Has that been something you've done a lot of, or have recently just started to get into, or?
3D printer, and that like opened up that world more for me.
Okay.
And then, so like I'll print like parts and skulls and like weird stuff like that I'll kind of weave into costumes. Probably the coolest thing I've made so far was I made this really cool like post-apocalyptic shotgun using like an airsoft gun. Looks pretty cool. And then I made a BMO from Adventure Time, like super rusty, and like I used an iPod Touch for its face, and it like kind of works.
That's good.
Yeah, it was cool. So it's been cool, but it's all been based like that. Definitely opened because of like Warhammer as a hobby. You know what I mean? And I had all the paints and like the techniques just at a bigger scale. It's really cool to work at a big scale.
Why on Instagram? Why on Instagram didn't you do the best 9 or the most liked 9 images of last year?
Why didn't I? I don't know.
Was it because you were disappointed that like the most inane images got the most likes or something?
Yeah.
Well, at least in your case, you don't like post new pictures from the Warhammer community that everyone's so excited about them. They upvote it, and then you do that best 9, and 5 of your best 9 are like Sisters of Battle. It's just like, I mean, they're cool, but dang.
Like I'm doing stuff wrong.
Yeah, no, I like put one together, and I was gonna post that, and I was gonna post it as my story, and then to be honest with you, I started moving. It's a really kind of a lame reason, but I moved to like doing 3 pictures per row because I like how it looks, you know, on the Instagram app, and so I was like, if I post one, do I have to like put 2 side border pictures, or do I do like best 27? Like, I don't know. Like,
yeah, no, that would be hard.
Yeah, so I was like, I won't spam people, and I'll just leave it.
It's fine. Yeah, okay. I guess, do you have of all the models and stuff you've created, do you have like a favorite or a couple that like you really feel fit you, or that you were really satisfied with?
Yeah, I like have my desk is this like super big. Hold on, can I flip this? I don't know.
You probably can.
So I have like this. So I've got this, right, and it's like I have kind of my top models on display up there. I don't know if you can see
all your Funko Pops.
Yeah, shit. Can we send you some more?
That too. Actually, they're just Hellboys, which is funny enough. But
yeah, because I know you talked to me the last time I saw you about how like you don't really like them, but you have them.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I don't know if I have a top number 1 favorite, but I definitely have some favorites. I think this guy, this like goat stilt walker guy, was
the Jabberwocky sort of.
Yeah, he was definitely one of my favorites, and still kind of is.
Was that inspired off the Lewis Carroll poem, The Jabberwocky?
I mean, that's where I got the name from, but other than that, I mean, and I guess maybe kind of the imagery, but.
Did you ever read that poem?
Yeah, way back in like high school, I think I did. Actually,
it's great. You should revisit it. It's great. I mean, that's where like the Vorpal weapons from Dungeons and Dragons, like the Vorpal blades that once you get a wound, it cuts people's heads off. That's where that came from. That poem. Yeah. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the Vorpal blade went snicker snack. He left it dead, and with its head, he went galumping back.
Yeah,
it's fucking great.
There it is, cool. Greg. Yeah, but actually, so that particular model has like the little chain pieces and stuff. Yeah. Do you, for any of your models that you use chain, do you try to fix any of that chain, or do you just leave it
dangling?
So I've done, I think maybe 1 or 2 models. So I had built some for those Yetis. I had built some models that I never finished, but they were like going to be riding on their backs, and they were going to be like this feral group of people. And so I made these flails that were like with regular modeling chain that I had like poured super glue over and like glued essentially to my desk to get into like an arc. So it was like they were actually swinging, and it kind of worked. But the only reason why I think it worked is because then I had also sprinkled in some model snow that like filled into the cracks. I really wanted to try it again for some of the Arco, like the what's it called? The Arco servitor people for systems.
Narcoflagellants?
The Arcoflagellants. I wanted to give them like maces because I'm apparently obsessed with maces and morning stars. But it's just like I can't figure out a better way to do it. Like, have you guys tried it?
I haven't tried it. It seems like be a real pain in the ass.
It is, yeah. It's like I'm just pouring glue all over my desk and hands and like everywhere to try to get this thing to stay.
Well, all I can say is the Tamiya thin cement will not help you.
Honestly, I'm gonna have to go back to.
It's fucking useless, man.
Like, why did you even buy it?
Okay, so actually, I have a question for you.
Sure.
How is your knight errant conversion going?
Terrible. I'm glad you didn't. I'm glad we didn't talk about it on the stream. We're not recording, right?
Well, so I mean, you could sort of, if you watch through everything on like the Twitch stream, it will be up for a little while, but like probably no one will watch it.
All right, so I'll just come out and say it was a project I thought I could maybe get behind. I was really excited to like try to rework the model you had sent, at least the space, like, and I even had started it to like build this tech marine. That was the one I was assigned, or maybe it was a apothecary, whatever. The point was, I like started on it, and then I just felt like the whole thing became more interested in like becoming like a popular event and like a well-known, like getting the people excited about this knight errant project and less about the actual modeling side of it. And then like the group chat like kind of gets out of control with like other stuff. I just became very turned off to it, and with like the other list of projects going on, it definitely hit the wayside.
Well, yeah, so I feel for me like so I'm still working on the model here and there, and I'm hoping to get back to it pretty soon because I've sort of been using it as an excuse to use that old true scale marine that I made and like repose it and like fix some of the things I wasn't happy with. So like I'm kind of using it as an excuse to kind of push like a modeling aspect or something. And so like I think it's a neat project, but like I sort of feel my angle at it's a little different from what a lot.
And it's kind of hard for that since it wasn't like it's not a thing for like to play a game or anything like that. There wasn't a clear defined time that they wanted people to finish it, and then it just kind of came out like let's do it like on Christmas or New Year's Day. It's like well I can't do that, so I guess I just won't even try. But
somehow our Instagram post about it got like 500 some likes, which that's a bunch.
People are probably disappointed that we haven't shown more about it.
Just dropped off.
Someday.
At least you like tried. I don't even think I posted anything. Maybe I did a story or something, but I don't know.
Looking at likes on our Instagram, at first I thought that the post about the handgun book had the least amount of likes, but no. That we have a post about making fun of Van's Warped Tour. And that only has 78 likes.
Ooh,
so I think
that's what you get.
That's
the
the
making
least.
fun of Van's Warped Tour.
Yeah. And then the next one that has not like the second least, at least that I've seen in the recent meandering, was the 2018 most notable hobbyists thing. Like we posted a picture on Instagram saying, hey, we just posted this thing of our favorite hobbyist from 2018. That only got 98 likes.
Oh,
but that was last year. That was last year. We're still in the process of writing our list for this year.
Oh, I didn't realize that got. I would have thought people would have liked that.
Well, I think it's just Instagram.
I mean, they liked the blog post, but I mean, it was a shitty Instagram thing in that there wasn't like a cool space marine for people to see.
That's what we should have put as the picture.
I think if when we do it this year, we should try to put just a series of pictures from some of their models because I don't know. I think Instagram, you're just scrolling through it quickly. Like if you see text, you scroll past.
Yeah.
I mean,
Usually
not
it's like a giveaway or something.
always, but it's
Yeah.
it's harder, and like it kind of makes sense.
Wait, we have 2 posts about
Oh,
the
yes.
Knights Errant thing. What the fuck?
But one of them actually has like work in progress stuff, I think.
Yeah,
Oh,
you guys
does
had like
it?
a work in progress.
Like
thing.
I
Oh
did
shit!
stuff.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
actually
Okay,
did stuff.
so that's legitimate.
I did
That's
stuff.
legitimate.
Like, and I started. I did a lot. I did a lot of resculpting and like work on like his bolter and stuff. And I think I was sort of at this model. I was trying to kind of push some of the stuff to like make certain stuff even smaller and kind of just poke fun at Games Workshop and their like designs and stuff. So I don't know, that's what I feel like every time I make like new like Space Marine models or new Imperial models. It's like, can I make the weapons even smaller? I think I can.
You should just like make like his feet like comically small, give him comically small, little tiny hands, like, little tiny gun. And just really go the other way.
Yeah.
Little tiny head.
Well, who knows? But I don't know. It's hard to know what the year will turn out into, what we'll ultimately end up doing. Because there's so much stuff you could be doing, like the Bone Reaper sort of thing. Was trying to get people interested in making those Bone Reapers into something neat. And we talked a little bit about with some people trying to take the Abaddon model and convert something with it, because that's like actually a cool looking Terminator.
Yeah, and that like kind of happened. I even did one myself. I had a really minor conversion with it. But...
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a nice model, showing that they could have, like, Terminators don't have to have their arms up by their ears.
They don't.
It's not a prerequisite.
And it'll still read as a Terminator if you don't do that. Crazy.
Yeah,
Love it.
Yeah, that model is awesome, actually.
Yeah, it's good. Hey, maybe we want to think about going to bed soon. At least it's almost 1 o'clock here. At least on the East Coast. It's probably midnight.
But it's still late.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. And that was fun. And seriously, I'd like to do, I mean, if you guys wanted to, we definitely do some sort of debrief after.
Yeah, no, I think that would be pretty cool. And maybe we could even get Isaac on as well, all together. And hell, I mean, anyone who's kind of there, it could be cool to get a whole group of us to kind of talk about it and what happened there.
Yeah.
But so it would be cool
to talk about. Cool.
Good luck with all your hobby stuff.
Get that stuff ready for Adepticon. You can do it.
We believe in you.
I'll pull it together. It'll work. That, or I'll throw it off my balcony. So we'll see what happens.
Whatever.
Hopefully not that.
All right. Well, thanks, guys.
Thanks. It was fun.
Bye.
See ya. Actually, Captain Timbo, he says he's actually started work on his Bone Reaper Mini. That's great.
My goodness. Yeah, good.
Well, I'm looking forward to see like what you do with it. I've been working pretty heavily on the one I've been to try, mainly to just have a post on the blog talking about the Bone Reaper challenge in general, so I can actually show that we're doing stuff too. And then I'll start sending the models out, because God knows I don't want the rest of them. Yeah, Dave X Dave, we'll send you one or two. Who knows? But yeah, we sort of decided we didn't want to start sending them out and stuff until we kind of had a blog post talking about the whole thing, so it would be easier if we like post stuff on Instagram. We could actually direct people somewhere such that they would actually know what like the event was, and there would be less confusion overall.
We tried to send one to Anna from Gardens of Hakate, but it was lost in the mail. So like the little we tried already got fucked.
Yeah, no, wasn't it two?
Yeah, we sent two.
They're
we
already
still have
gone.
tons of them though, so it's not no one has to worry.
Yeah,
no one has to worry.
All right. Yeah. Well, again, it was nice. Thanks everybody for joining us here and chatting and listening to us ramble.
Yeah, certainly, Captain Timboy. If you have work in progress, however minor, feel free to send pictures and stuff. We're always interested.
Yeah.
Oh, good to hear you've started working on your first GW kit, Dave X Dave. Most of their models and stuff, they are very nice, and like, particularly like over the years, they've gotten a lot better and better. And it's also, I know for me, like every time I look at like even like the models that I've made, even going back like and looking at the models, I sometimes surprise myself how much smaller and stuff they really are, and like looking at pictures doesn't always give you a good sense of what like people are actually working on. But yeah,